within those 3 months, they had 300 people already on the website registered because they had a very unique USP. And once they launched, they were already making revenue because they had, warmed up the audience, told them why we are different, why we are not charging commissions for the tutoring services that you give to students. So you've talked about something like index card website. Could you share that story, please?
Well, that one question has like 8 or 9 different parts, but let's hit the big ones, right? So the number one thing you need to do when you're doing customer discovery with anybody, but especially when you're dealing with people who are, not that available, is you got to make sure you're talking to the right people. So you got to go figure out who that person is. It's a little easier if you're direct to consumer, like some of the students in my class are building an alert app that'll manage all your different deals.
Now, many founders in legal tech, they think early revenue, they mistake, in fact, early revenue for being product market fit. Now, since your book, The Entrepreneur's Odyssey, focuses on the narrative of success, what is the climax of the seed stage?
Yeah, so I always say this, and it's the same for an investment round and an actual acquisition, right? It ain't over until there's money in the bank, right? And I know a lot of founders kind of like, oh, we're almost there, and they drop the ball, and like things fall apart. So you have to be really careful about that. The other thing you have to be careful about is when you're dealing with very large corporate, there are exceptions to this, their sense of time is different than your sense of time. And I'll give you a silly example. Like it's a little earlier on. I'll talk about sales because it'll make more sense to the founders on this call. You're having a conversation with a law firm, like, oh, we love it. Let's talk about it. And like in them, they might have one guy whose job it is to do this kind of corporate development. They get paid no matter what. You have 9 months of runway, right?
Hello, everyone. So today with another episode, I have Andrew B. Ackerman is a serial entrepreneur, early stage investor, and author of an amazing book, Entrepreneur's Odyssey. With over 20 years of experience, Andrew has founded 2 companies, invested in over 70 startups, and mentored hundreds of founders through top-tier accelerators like DreamIt Ventures. Currently, he serves as an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Sims Schools of Business and is a strategic advisor to Second Century Ventures. So it's a pleasure having you here, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
So Andrew, with your experience, and you're a huge advocate of customer discovery, right? So how does a founder do honest discovery with law firm partners who are guarded with time, poor, and conditioned to bill like $800 an hour? So for every conversation for starting a startup.
Wow, right. That one question has like 8 or 9 different parts, but let's hit the big ones, right? So the number one thing you need to do when you're doing customer discovery with anybody, but especially when you're dealing with people who are not that available, is you got to make sure you're talking to the right people. So you got to go figure out who that person is. It's a little easier if you're direct to consumer, like some of the students in my class are building an alert app that'll manage all your different deals. Right? Okay, they can go out there and like their target market were women ages 18 to 65. Right? And they can go out there and talk to anybody. But if you're looking for a B2B sale and the decision maker is fairly high up, you want to really research the company and figure out who that person is. So sometimes they'll have a chief innovation officer, a vice president of innovation. If that's the case, like awesome, you found that person, and then you just need to network to that person, which is a different question entirely. If you can't find that person, you got to do a little bit more sleuthing. So you can do things like kind of structured or unstructured web searches or AI searches to try to figure out from comments they make at conferences or on the rare occasions lawyers use social media, any posts like that, like who within that organization is either formally or informally the guy that likes to talk to startups, if anybody. You might even try networking your way into friendly people kind of at the mid-level who know who the players are and can tell you, yeah, candidly, you got to go talk to Bob or Sarah. Like they're the only people here that really care about that. So once you found the right person, and you can network to that right person before you reach out. And usually the best way to reach out is a warm intro. Like, hey, Andrew, can you introduce me to Bob? You want to craft that perfect forwardable intro email. And I talk about it in the book in the context of an investor outreach, but it's kind of the same thing, right? These are time-starved people. So short emails, scannable emails, 2, 3, 4 sentences, maybe bullet points, and something along the lines of, in the case of, trying to get out with a client, it would be, hey, Andrew, I see you're connected with Bob so-and-so on LinkedIn. My understanding is Bob is the point person for innovation at law firm XYZ. As you know, my firm does blah, right? And tell them what you do in a sentence or two. Maybe even drop a little traction if you have it. Nothing makes people more comfortable taking a call with a startup knowing that other firms are actually already using them. Do you know so-and-so well enough to make that intro? Now, there's a couple of pieces to that. I'm going to take, if you don't mind, I'll take 20 seconds to dissect it.
Sure.
Number one, you're describing your startup to them. Now, the reason you're doing that, like even if the introducer knows what you're doing, don't make them think. Don't make them do work. Right? Just give them something they can hit forward. Make it easy on them. The easier you make it on them, the more likely they are to do it. Plus, you probably know how to define your business and explain your business better than they do because you're doing it all the time. So put the right words in their mouth and make it easy. Connect the dots for them. Like once they have to look at it and be like, oh yeah, you're right. Bob is the innovation person for, Paul Weiss. Okay, no problem, right? Don't make them think about that either. And then give them an easy out because occasionally they're not going to want to do it, right? Maybe they don't like your startup. Maybe they think you're a moron, but they're too polite to tell you that. Or maybe they actually don't know Bob well enough and they don't want to admit that, right? So, they might just ghost you. Like, unfortunately, that's become more and more common. They hope that you'll forget, and you probably will, unless you're very, rigorous about it's been 4 days or 7 days. I need to follow up, which you should. But by saying, do you know so-and-so well enough to make the intro, you're giving them an easy out. They can say, yeah, I know Bob, but I only see him at conferences twice a year. If you know someone better, you should go take that. So you get a quick answer. Because at the end of the day, when you want to get that first foot in the door, you're the one that needs to be on top of that. And you want to make it quick and easy. And getting a quick no is the second best answer because then you can ask somebody else. Silence is the worst because then you're kind of stuck in limbo.
Right. Now, going from this, what I understand that it basically you also mentioned this in your book, where the protagonist Marcus faces hurdles that are universal to founders, but particularly in legal tech. The villain is often the inertia or the billable R, that how law firm functions today. How would you coach a founder whose biggest competitor isn't another startup, but we've always have done this way mindset?
Yeah. So there's again, like these are great questions because there's 2 or 3 elements to it. So I'll start with one of the more surprising elements, right? Probably the number one thing that people get wrong on their competition slide is the status quo. So they think about all the other startups that are doing it, but 99% of the companies are still doing it with like Excel or Post-it notes even, right? I have a company in the construction tech space where we talked about it. It's like, oh, here are all my competitions. Like, no. Go down to a site. What do you see? It's like, well, I see a clipboard like magnetically attached to the side of a trailer. And it's like, and is that how often do you see that? It's like 99% of your time. Well, then guess what? The clipboard is your competition.
Yeah.
So, it's very, very true that, how we do it now, as low tech and as crappy as it is often your number one competition, certainly when you're at the earliest stages. So you have to start off, number one, you got to have a solution that's a quantum level better than that. People don't switch unless it's, really that big. So once if you don't have that, we're over, move on, don't do it. Now, if you do have it, you need again, these guys bill by the hour. You need your 8 or 10 second description that fits into a 30-second elevator pitch that lets them kind of lean back and be like, hot damn, I don't have that. And that is something I really need. Right. And you got to get that. You only have about 8 or 10 seconds because the rest of your elevator pitch deals with like dropping traction and stuff like that. So, um, you really need that. And imagine you're at a conference and like people are walking past your booth.
Mm.
Like that's all the time you get to get them to stop, not go where they think they want to go and come back to you. So that's the analogy I help people to think. So has to be quantum level better, has to be like that 8 to 2nd, like, oh my God, you're right. That is better and I need it. The other thing is, I haven't found billability to be the main issue. Like, architects also billable, right? I mean, I do a lot of construction tech. It's not that. If they really want it and it's painful, they'll find the time to do this. Like, no one's getting fired because they took a half hour off to talk to you, about the startup. But it is that, like, getting to the right person, communicating enough to get them to lean back, and even just ask the first 2 or 3 questions. That's really interesting. We haven't gone down that path because we're worried about X. How do you handle that with privacy, whatever the issue is? And then you have to have your quick answer for that. So you've gone from like a 30-second elevator pitch, and which a core 10-second description of your product buys you 2 or 3 meaningful questions, like a 3-minute conversation. And if you handle that right, it buys you the half-hour meeting.
Yeah,
so at
definitely.
each point in the process, you're selling enough of what you do to make the other party decide that's worth more of my time. That's the way to think about it.
That's a great advice, actually, for everybody who's like busy and works in a compliant industry. So what if, let's suppose there's so many startups coming out these days because of the AI, there's an acceleration startup. Let's flip this around on the side of law firms. Right? What is the most effective way for them to work? Because a lot of my audience belongs to managing partners. What do you think about that?
I give 2-hour seminars on this, so I would have to struggle to be really concise. So just as background, like, when I was running at DreamIt, and I was doing a lot of these customer introductions, we had a lot of corporate venture funds that we would talk to. And I thought those were awesome. They can invest and partner and do pilots. They're cutting edge, awesome. And then after the first meeting or two, they kind of like disappeared. So just to understand why that was the case, to be more effective, I dove really deep into the corporate innovations function. And, I find a couple of things that are kind of common about it. One of them is if you're actually doing it as an innovation, as an investment opportunity, you buy people get people who are supposedly really good at finding startups. They're good. They'll filter it. They'll find like, okay, here's 10 startups doing it. These are the 1 or 2 I want to talk to. They get really good at it. And if they are really good at it, then they make a great investment and they still just get salary and bonus. Like, F that. I'm going to go join a real fund where I can get 20% carry on my wins. So you're kind of structurally, if you're doing that, you're structurally designing the best to leave. So there's a whole set of recommendations about if you're doing it as a corporate venture fund, how you do it to actually make sure you keep good talent and it sustains itself. But let's take it a step back. I mean, let's say like, I'm not going to do a venture fund. I just, my job is just to find really good startups. Well, congratulations. At least you have a person with that job, right? And there's a title and people can look up innovation, in LinkedIn. And by the way, get on LinkedIn. I know you're a lawyer, but just suck it up and do it, right? There's nothing wrong with it. There's no legal exposure, right? Between you and me, you're just being lazy. You're just not doing it because lawyers don't do it. You want to get with startups, you got to live on LinkedIn. And they'll find you. They'll come to you. So then your responsibility, other than being very visible, is learning how to filter. Right? You can talk to startups all day. So you need to know, what does your organization really need? Hey, we're looking at AI. That's not what you need. That's like saying I'm looking at mobile telephone technology. No, you need someone where you can make a call while you're running between meetings, right? That's the pain point. That's the function. So work backwards from, if I find a great startup that solves problem X, I'm a hero. And then focus on getting those 2 or 3 things, just get the right one, because that'll build momentum for more engagement. So then the next thing is the gap between you and all the people in the firm who would actually use it. And this is a problem, in law firms, especially because everyone's got their own, like that partner is billing like, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, we hope. Like she can do whatever she wants, right? You can't force them to do it. That happens a lot. But even in like traditionally structured organizations, the guys that are running like the Southeast division of your country, There's nothing in their compensation that says, hey, if you pilot with 2 or 3 startups, you're going to get a bonus or promoted.
Mm.
So you're going to these people and you're trying to convince them to do stuff where they might say, yeah, I really want to do that, but because it's not a billable opportunity, it goes way
Mm.
to the bottom of lists of things you do. So if you're actually doing this as an organization,
Mm.
and you have a mandate from the partners to do it, you want to think structurally about how you actually get people to test it and do it. Maybe you're taking mid-level people and you actually have a budget of billable hours they can get for testing these things, right?
Yep.
Remove the disincentives. Maybe you're even giving people budget, like, hey, we've set aside $50,000 for pilots. Anyone who does it, you apply to me, it's like a 2.5-page form, right? Just why do you want to do it? What's the upside impact? And the first 5 people to do it in the quarter get a $10,000 grant to do the pilot. Right? Create
Mm.
scarcity. You need tactics like this
Mm.
that actually speak to the person in the line and make it not only not a distraction for them, but make it something they
Mm.
wanted. Highly visible, promotable, bonusable, that kind of thing.
That's a great answer,
If
and
you
I
want
think
more, come to me. I'll set up a 2 hour conversation with you.
definitely that's a very, very important thing that law firms need to understand, and the big law specifically, which is r- notoriously lethargic. Now, moving towards the startups in the second stage, the seed stage.
Mhm.
Um, Now, many founders in legal tech, they think early revenue, they mistake, in fact, revenue for being product market fit. Now, since your book, The Entrepreneur's Odyssey, focuses on the narrative of success, what is the climax of the seed stage? That
Yeah.
one
So
signal. Yeah.
Yeah, let me kind of break it down. So I've done
Mm.
everything from like the earliest stage, from angel investing and acceleration, which
Mm.
is kind of pre-seed, and we work
Mm.
with them until they're ready to raise a seed. Then I've done seed, and I've done Series A, and even done later, but that's a little bit of an exception. And I even work with later stage startups on like, do I exit, raise more, that kind of stuff. So I've seen the whole spectrum, at least as far up as like the B. I'm not the guy to go to if you're raising a Series F, but I kind of think of it this way, right? You want to have, we'll put this in air quotes, product market fit at the end of your seed stage. That's what you're going to raise your seed round is. So product
Mm.
market fit can, and in many cases is revenue, but I'm going to put a big asterisk on that,
Mm.
right? So if you're let's say you're a lawyer, you left your big firm to create like a tech-enabled law firm, or you want to create software for it, but you're going out there and you're actually practicing as a lawyer, you're just using your technology in-house to be better. And then you come to an investor and you're like, I got $1 million in revenue. And then I drill
Mm.
down. It's like, oh, that's billable hours. I thought you were a software company. It's like, yeah, we're going to switch it
Mm.
over and start charging for SaaS. The problem with that is that revenue doesn't tell me the things that I actually want to know, that tells me product market fit. Now, if you are $1 million, or in case of a seed stage company, maybe 100,000, 200,000 across 2 or 4 star clients, but it's actually SaaS revenue and they're using your software,
Mm.
that tells me a lot. That tells me it's a reasonable pain point because people don't pay unless it's a real pain point. That tells me that the pricing is acceptable. It's probably too low, actually, but it's acceptable enough that they'll pay at least that much. And by the way, since your total addressable market done properly is just a very simple bottoms up, A times B equals C, right? How much do you charge? By how many law firms are there, say in the US, or how many lawyers are there, depending on how you charge? That's your total addressable market. So once you've proven the price, that's half of the equation right there.
Mm.
It helps you prove your total addressable market, right? That's 3, right? And number 4, it tells me if you've got 2 or 3 of them, maybe you can sell. And I'll ask you, how do you get it? Oh, they're my friends at 4 different firms. Okay, that's less. And I was like, yeah, like my first one's a friend, but then I just picked up the phone because I wanted to see if I could actually make a sale. Well, hey, that tells me you can sell. That's 4 pieces of data that I get from just
Mm.
a little bit of revenue. So yeah, I checked the box on product market fit for a seed stage. So okay, congrats, you got your seed stage. Now you have 18 months to get to the next milestone.
Mm.
And that's usually, let's talk about a SaaS company, because I bet a lot of your companies are software. Sorry. AI solutions for law firms. Doesn't really matter. It's at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's software. Um, what I want to see is typically $1 to $3 million of annual recurring revenue, and it'll vary by the
Mm,
type of industry. It'll vary by the type of company. It'll vary by the phase in the market we're in.
mm,
The best way to figure out what that is as a founder early on, find an investor who invests at the next phase. Or if your own investors do that phase, just sit down and say, listen, I know it's 18 months before I need more money, but
mm,
what are you looking for at that stage? Is it $1 million?
mm,
Is that enough? Or is that light? 2 million? And they'll tell you, like, I'm usually looking for X. So great. You've sourced what your milestone is from the people you actually have to sell to in 18 months, meaning investors at this point, and then you work backwards to get there. But it's usually changing from, hey, I made a couple of sales, I've got product market
mm,
fit, to
mm,
like, I have a sales process that's kind of working. And
mm,
again, totally suboptimal. It may still be founder led, but at least I've started to think about, like, how do I do this? It's repeatable, right? It's not just a
mm,
fluke, not just 2 or 3 people. So then, mazel tov, you raised your Series A. What are you doing
mm.
next? Well, guess what? You can't be the salesperson anymore, because
Yeah.
there's only so many hours in your day, especially when you take away
Mhm,
everything else you have to do. So now you got to prove that you can scale that. You got to prove that you can hire a sales force. And ideally,
mm,
you've started to do this already a little bit, but you're bringing in like a head of marketing, whatever you want to call him or her. They're building out a sales force, and you have that sales funnel that, like I talked to you about before. Like, let's get
mm,
3 minutes of their time. But you start thinking, I need qualified leads. I want to take them through the demo. I want to know, like, what percentage of them get to legal and what my final win rate is. You want to have a formal process with not a lot, maybe 4 to 6 stages, but well-defined stages. Because if you don't measure it, you're not going to get better at it. So you want to build all that infrastructure so that when you go out for your Series B, you're like, this is my process, right?
mm,
It's gotten a lot better. I don't have to spend all my time on it anymore. I got the people in place, and they're just going to keep churning away. And, when I need to expand, Jane's going to hire more people, right? Because she's my head
yeah.
of marketing. So then you got your B stage,
Mm,
and then you're thinking, what do I do next, right? Well, maybe you sell, maybe you buy more to scale. Now you're thinking, what do I do to move the needle at this stage? Helping optimize the sales force, that's not going to move at 20, 30, 40% my top line. So now you're thinking about new geographies, maybe
mm,
adjacent products, totally new products that you can open up. Maybe you're thinking about acquiring your competition that's not as good as you,
mm,
and maybe not able to raise their next round. So you can
mm,
go and buy their book of business, bolt it on, right? Maybe the same company, just take their customers, shut them down, take their best engineers. Or maybe they're adjacent products, like, oh, this is a nice add-on product, and they're
mm,
struggling, so I can get them for a song. So that's your challenge when you get to the post B. Like the song goes, should I stay or should I go? Right? And
mm.
if I go,
Exactly.
will be trouble. I know, you get the idea. Like, your role changes at all those stages, and what the investor like me is looking for at
Mm.
each of those stages changes.
Definitely. And that's the most important point, because I think building systems is, after all, the best thing, rather than, doing everything like yourself or being a doer.
Mhm.
So just stepping back a bit, right? Because we have talked from Series A to Series B, but I just want to introduce you to one of these things that I basically had a very good experience with. So this Canadian firm came up to me and they wanted an MVP build, right?
Mhm.
Although it was not in legal tech, it was in ed tech. So initially, what we did was we built just a simple website with a certain USP and a counter that in 3 months we're going to launch, and you should, register on the website.
Mhm.
Within those 3 months, they had 300 people already on the website registered because they had a very unique USP. And once they launched, they were already making revenue because they had, warmed up the audience, told them why we're
Mhm.
different, why we're not charging commissions for the tutoring services that you
Mhm.
give to students. So you've talked about something like index card website. Could you share
Yeah.
that story, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So all this falls under the bucket of, don't just do something, stand there, right? That's the number one mistake first time founders make. They have this idea. Oh my God, it's a huge problem. I'm going to go code that. All right.
Mm.
And then they spend 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, in a room, hoodie down, trying to code it.
Mm.
Or they hire somebody, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to build the site, and then they roll it out to the world, and then crickets,
Mm.
because they didn't bother to talk to enough other customers to figure out, is this really the same pain point that they have? Or if it is the same pain point, are they solving it the right way? Are they building unnecessary features? Are they hitting the right ones? So everything we're going to talk about here are attempts to figure that out, de-risk that before you jump in with 2 feet. So you had, the unique selling proposition, or your 8-second pitch, whatever it is. That's the time you talk to customers. A lot of people say, "Oh, I have to show them something." You don't have to show them anything, right? You don't have to show them anything. If you can describe it and they can get it, that's when you start talking to them. That's when you start probing. Save yourself tons of time. Now, if you want to get a little bit fancier, you can do the index card website that I talk about in the book, right? Okay, let's say you're the founder, right? First thing I need you to do is go to the bank and steal a pen, right? We're cheap. Okay. Don't pay for things you don't have to, right? Go to a bank, tons of pens. Then go, and I don't have them here, but get some index cards, or you can rip up pieces of paper if you want to be super ghetto about it. $5. And take your free pen and your $5 index cards and sketch out on each of them the screens of your app, your website. Totally crude. Don't worry about making it look sexy. You just want it to be functional, right? Kind of laid out almost like a cartoon version of the site. And then you want to talk to 30 or 40 people who are your potential customers. I know it's a little harder in B2B, but you can work on it. Hey, you don't have to talk to the partner of the law firm. You can talk to a third-year associate, right? If they're not feeling the pain and it's only the partner, that's going to be a problem. There are not that many of them, right? So find people that are accessible, find 30 or so of those people, more if you can, and say, hey, listen, here's what I want to do. I want to show you my app. I haven't built it yet, though, but I want to show you my app. And I want to see what you think of it. But I don't want just to talk about it. I want to put it in front of you. And I want you to interact with it as if this is my actual website. Here's an index card. You're going to touch it when you want to click. You're going to swipe if you want to swipe. Depending on what you do, I'll give you another card. Now, don't ask me questions, because if you download it, I'm not there. The founder's not there to answer your questions. I just want to see what happens. And I'm going to ask you to do one thing a little differently. Whatever you're thinking, just say it out loud. Can't really, can't read your mind. I want to understand what you're thinking. And then you just do it and you watch it. And you're going to learn some really interesting things. You'll see where they're confused and they don't know what to do. That's a user interface problem. You'll see, wow, I gave it to 30 people and 29 of them didn't touch this whole section of the site. Maybe I don't need to build that. Maybe they don't care. Or, oh my God, when they saw something that got really exciting, I got something there. Or they might say, I kind of want to click that button, but I'm worried about, maybe X will happen. Privacy, data, whatever the thing is. Okay, I need to work on that interface to make people more comfortable doing that. And then at the end of each one of these interviews, you break character, right? You say, hey, I noticed a couple of things. Can we talk about that? I noticed you didn't go anywhere there. Why didn't you go there? And they might say yeah, it's not a problem. Or they might say, oh, I didn't know any of that existed. It's well, what about that button? It's yeah, I didn't know that. That didn't seem like it was going to take me to what you just described. So you can learn all these things. And for the $5 in index card and the free pen that you stole, and a couple hours of your time of these interviews, you can save yourself months of work. And if you're doing outside dev, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in unnecessary work. Now, as you know, saving 4 months, saving $50,000, that's the beginning. That's the difference between life and death for a lot of startups. And especially so if you're in a very fast moving space. If you've lost 4 months and they didn't, that's it. You're too far behind. So things like that are the things a good founder are thinking about. How can I test something cheaply and fast before I do it? That can make the difference between making or breaking a startup.
Yeah, definitely. And in my personal experience as well, I obviously run a service company for legal tech. But what I've seen is that talking directly to partners and selling them is almost impossible. In fact, what you should do is you should go and find the people that work in the firm, talk to them. They're the easiest to talk to, and they will tell you everything that they face every single day. And I think that's a great advice from your side as well, that this is the way you should actually start talking with
Yeah.
people.
It's a
And
little bit of a grassroots strategy, right? At
yeah.
the end of the day, your user, like I'm going to sell for lawyers. That's actually a good topic, right? So I'm glad you brought it up. Like, and I cover this in the book. I cover this in my class when I teach it. Um, you tend to think about your customer or your user, but in some cases you have multiple people that are involved in it. So like, let's take a silly example. I'm buying a candy bar, right? I benefit from it. I decided which one I wanted to buy and I paid for it. So it's all me in this case. But let's take, well, I was going to say healthcare, but let's take a law firm, right? Uh, you might have a partner making the decision for software that the vast majority of people using are not partners. It's going to be all like the 1 to 4Ls using this, right? Or the
Yeah.
paralegals too. So, one guy decides, other people hopefully benefit from it. And then you got to ask yourself, what budget's it coming out of? Right? It may be coming out of the budgets of each individual office. So a partner in New York is making a decision that heads of offices in LA and Chicago and Miami are going to have to pay for people that are not him or her. So
Yeah.
if you have one of those situations where it's actually 2 or 3 people that are involved in the buying, the benefit, and the actual paying, you need to talk to all of those characters in the play. Right. So to your point, start with the people who benefit, right? Because if they're not benefiting from it, game over, right? And then you got to figure out like the other stuff. Those are, once you have that. So, and they can help you, right? You start with the people who benefit. Like, that's awesome. What would it take to buy this? Oh, you got to go talk to Bob. He's the one that makes that decision. And then you're talking to Bob. It's like, that's awesome. They love it. Yeah, they told me they love it. I'm in. And you want to ask things, well, what's the purchase process like? Well, you got to go talk to like Cindy in Chicago and like Larry in LA. And then like, oh my God. Okay, different type of sales process. But that's the kind of things you learn in customer discovery, ideally before you've gone too far down the path. The sooner you learn those things, the better.
Right. So moving towards, right, you have built the processes, everything. Now you're moving towards B and Series B and beyond. In the later stages, the Odyssey becomes about defending the castle. For a legal tech or enterprise startup, how do you advise founders to handle the innovator's dilemma?
Sure. By the way, Innovator's Dilemma is a great book. There's actually another great book called The Founder's Dilemmas, which talk about like all these things. Wonderful guy. He was actually, until recently, the dean of the business school who twisted my arm into teaching in the first place. So if I'm going to promote any book that's not my own, it's Founder's Dilemmas, The Founder's Dilemmas by Noam Wasserman. Anyway, but we digress. So, my book ends when you've raised your seed round. It covers everything from like this fictional startup, everything from idea all the way through to like what you need to do to actually prove out the idea, customer discovery, write your pitch deck. And then like the last third is the whole process of finding and nurturing and closing investment. Now, going beyond that, I've been doing this for like 20 years, got over 70 portfolio companies. As my portfolio companies have matured and they've gone into this territory, I've had to mature along with them. So one of the groups I'm with now is a group called Thunder. It's essentially a boutique investment bank by founders who have had multiple exits for founders. So instead of it being an investment banker who in his heart of hearts would like to do a 100 million or 200 million transaction, but can't, and he floats down into, pardon my I apologize to people who do this, but like maybe the minor leagues, and he's doing $30 million transactions. These are founders who have come up. They've done it. We've made horrible mistakes or gotten very lucky and avoided horrible mistakes. And we can talk to a post-Series A or Series B founder about what really they need to be thinking about at that stage in their career. So we started to talk about this a little bit, right? Your goal as the CEO is, other than get the money so everyone else can do what they need to do, right? That's buying oxygen for the spaceship. Your goal is to think about, how can I move the needle like in a big way, a step level? Like, how do I make this company twice as valuable? How do I boost my top line by 30%? And that changes in the course of the startup, right? You go get your first couple of customers. Awesome, right? That's your seed, right? Get me to $2 million ARR. Like, that's your Series A. That opens up your Series A. Now, when you're at the Series, and then you're scaling, we talked about that. I won't repeat it. but you need to think about what does it take now to move the needle.
Mm.
So
Mm.
again, let's go a little deeper, right? You may be in a situation where you're one of the companies that have made it past that winnowing of the field.
Mm.
There's a lot of great tech out there and companies that aren't hitting their milestones. So what happens to them? Well, if they're doing like $500,000 in revenue, they die, right? You can scoop them up. You may not even have to pay them money. You're like, I'll
Yeah.
do it. I'll value your company at $3 million, stock swap. And their investors are like, yeah, it was going to be a zero. I know this is kind of less than I invested at, but at least now I have a ticket in a company that's going to make it. And you do that. They're not doing that much, but if you have their tech and it's complementary to yours, and you can start selling it to your customer base, that could be worth a couple of $1 million to you.
Mm.
And if you're doing $5 million right now, and you can bolt on another 2 or 3, that's worthy of your time. Now, if you're going to do that approach, you need, well, in that example, you don't need a war chest, it's a stock swap, but you need your investors on board to do it. But you might decide, you know what, I'm going to go acquire them. I don't want to give them stock. I want to pay them out. Well, now you need to raise money for that. What kind of money do you raise? Now, raising just equity is the default, but there's a lot of other type of equity out there that's less dilutive to you and it's better suited to what you want to do. So if you're doing that strategy, you got to think through those things. Same thing applies. I want to expand into a new geography. Okay, like I'm going to Europe now. Great, that's a whole new field. But now you got to go think about, like, who do I hire? How do I localize the product, right? How do I replicate this team and make sure it works in a slightly different environment? And again, you're going to need money for that. That's probably going to be an equity round, right? That feels like an equity round, generally speaking. But who you go with is different. I need a European VC on this because I want someone who I can lean on. So you start thinking about things like that. But that can move the needle. But then actually, even before you do all this, I said, dude, you got to sit back a little. Right? If your last round was a $10 million round at a 50 million post, right? That's a healthy Series A.
Yeah.
And now you're going to go raise this money for international expansion or to acquire others. You're going to raise $30 million. The $30 million could be at a $100 million, $200 million valuation. Well, you've just raised the bar on what you can exit at. Before, if you exited with like 70 or $80 million, people are happy. You're making money. Now, if you exit at like 100 and your last round was at a 200 post, you're not making any money. Your investors will get their money back, but you won't see a dime of that. So you got to be comfortable that you can get to that next level. And when you think about, well, whatever I'm doing, I need to get to that valuation, you're probably signing on for another 4 years minimum. So it actually pays to sit back at that level and ask yourself, like, gut check, do I want to be doing this for another 4 years? And if the answer is like, hell yes, there's nothing else I want to do, that's great. If you're like, starting to drag, then maybe you sell, or maybe you bring in a different CEO and you kind of rise up to the chairman of the board and do other things. So those are the things you need to think about when you start getting into that stage. And, in case it wasn't blatantly obvious, it's really different than what you've done before. And that's the hardest thing for being a founder of a startup. Every year and a half and 2 years, you need to develop radically different skills.
Yeah. Exactly. So that was like one of the best insights that anybody could give the startup founders. Now, moving towards the last stage, which is the exit. You often speak about the soft no's from VCs, but what about the false yes from acquirers?
Yeah, so I always say this, and it's the same for an investment round and an actual acquisition, right? It ain't over until there's money in the bank, right? And I know a lot of founders kind of like, oh, we're almost there, and they drop the ball, and like things fall apart. So you have to be really careful about that. The other thing you have to be careful about is when you're dealing with very large corporate, there are exceptions to this, their sense of time is different than your sense of time. And I'll give you a silly example. Like, it's a little earlier on. I'll talk about sales because it'll make more sense to the founder on this call. You're having a conversation with a law firm, like, oh, we love it. Let's talk about it. And like in them, they might have one guy whose job it is to do this kind of corporate development. They get paid no matter what. You have 9 months of runway, right? You want to close this deal right away. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll talk to people. So and so is busy on a big case, or maybe
Hmm.
the economic environment is choppy. We're going to pause this for a quarter. A quarter is a blink
Hmm.
of an eye to corporate.
Yeah.
For you, that's a third of what's left of your runway.
Yeah. That's true.
So, by the way, and if you're on the corporate side, understand that time is different for
Yeah.
startups.
Yeah.
Understand that, like, you got to work at their pace.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're not going to get any of them. So, excuse me. So, when you're doing an acquisition, one of the best things you can do is have a good banker in your back, because they'll understand the timing. They'll understand how to interpret what they're hearing
Hmm.
from the corporate. And you might think, oh, I'm so close. Like, no, dude, you got like 6 months of due diligence ahead of you,
Hmm.
right? Or they sound like they're really in. Now we got to run a
Hmm.
process. We got to bring other bidders in. So you really
Hmm.
need someone who knows that game. You're only
Hmm.
playing it once. The corporations are doing it half a dozen times, in a given couple of years. Your banker ideally has done it scores of times. Like your
Yeah.
banker and your lawyer, they do this a lot. So you really need to get the right person in your back pocket to help you do it. And if you are fast growing, doing 20, 30 million in revenue, and you can be in like the hundreds of $1 million transaction, go for a lawyer who specializes in your, sorry, not a lawyer, of course, a banker who specializes in your field, knows all the players, super tight process. If you're earlier on and you're running it and it's going to be a smaller transaction, then you really, really, really have to like look hard to find a banker that understands you, understands what it's like to be a founder, understands these transactions. And I empathize because it's hard. They'll all say the
Hmm.
right things, but most of them aren't going to be the right fit for you or aren't going to really get the right deal for you. So it's super hard at that stage to find the
Hmm.
guy that you now realize you need in your back, on your back, if you're not at the $100 million transaction phase.
Yeah. Definitely. So that's important. But here's one question that, because we have finished all the stages, and of all these stages, which one is the value of death, where
Ooh.
you see the highest percentage of good companies fall
Ooh.
for avoidable
It's
reasons?
generally the earlier you get is the higher attrition rate.
Hmm.
Like once you're getting into like a Series B or Series C round, the kind of investments are different. Like you get people who come in, they're like, oh, we want 1.5 or 2 times liquidity preference, but they're thinking they're going to get their money back in 3 or 4 years no
Hmm.
matter what. And on the upside, they can get 5, 6, 7x. On the
Hmm.
downside, they'll get their liquidity preference, and if it's 3 years and they're getting 50%, like that's not horrible for a later stage investor.
Hmm.
And the idea that you might actually go to zero at that point is fairly low. Though now, like,
Hmm.
SaaS companies were flying high. AI comes in and like, oh, we might be killing SaaS. So like, put a
Yeah.
big asterisk on that. But by and large, when you get to that like Series B, Series C level, you're gonna find a landing. It's just a question of
Hmm.
how good it's going to be, and is it going to be good for you personally as the founder. Your investors are a little less worried about that. So the bigger issue is earlier on because you don't have a lot of leeway to make mistakes, right? You slight delays, you run out of runway, you're gone. You can't get a line of credit like a later
Hmm.
stage company because they don't know you, right? They have no idea that you're going to be able to pay it back. You don't even have revenue in some cases. But I will tell you, and this is because I kind of get the sense you're looking for something a little less obvious than that.
Hmm.
Um, the hardest part sometimes is not your first 2 or 3 customers. It's
Hmm.
going from like customer number 3 to customer number 10. And the reason
Hmm.
is if, in most cases, certainly in legal tech, but most B2B companies, if you're not from the industry, you got no business creating a startup for the industry. You got
Hmm.
to have at least someone who's deep in the law world on your team.
Hmm.
So like otherwise, like you guys aren't talking the right language, and it's true in
Yeah.
construction. It's in a lot of other
Yeah.
industries, ed tech too. Um, so if you have that person who's like deeply embedded in the space, you can often get your first 2 or 3 customers or pilots just by picking up the phone and asking.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's like, hey Jim, I got the new startup. You want to try myself? Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Oh, that sounds really good. You don't have to worry about fighting for Jim's
Hmm.
attention. He's going to take your call. And then when you go after that
Exactly.
first three that you got, and now it's people who you didn't know, they're not in your network. And I have to fight for them to actually pay attention to the email you said or to take the call. They're not even thinking enough to open it. Getting from 3 to 10 or whatever that number is, that can be the hard part because it requires, again, different skills, right? You went from like understanding what the problems were and getting it built to now I have to understand sales. I have to understand how to get my foot in the door. And a lot of companies flounder at that point.
That's so true. That's so true. Now, obviously, for one podcast, my guest, his 20 years of experience cannot be summed up. To be very honest, he's such the knowledge is so deep that we have to have multiple sittings over each part, and every part is so deep that it requires a lot of conversation. But everybody who's listening today, I would recommend that you go through his website and buy his book, The Entrepreneur's Odyssey, at least. Start there, because that's a lot of information and it's written wonderfully with a fictional story, and that's going to help you a lot. So thank you, Andrew. Is there something else you want to add before we close today's podcast?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, like this is like a 45 minutes, but I'll tell you, if you're an early stage startup, I'll tell you exactly how long it's gonna take you. It's gonna take you 5 hours. And I can tell you because
Okay.
my book's about 240, 250 pages long. And if you read it an average pace of like 40 to 50 pages, you can spend 4 or 5 hours, 6 if you read slowly and want to take notes. And I guarantee you that you will come up with multiple things. You're like, oh my God, thank you. Like that could have killed my company. So I
Hmm.
joke about it. It's totally self-serving, but this is 20 years of me coaching a lot of
Hmm.
startups. And by the way, it's written like a novel rather than a how-to
Hmm.
guide, so it's not boring. So
Yeah.
it's a quick 4 or 5 hours, and I can't think of anything if you are first an early stage startup that you could do with 5 hours of your time that will have as much impact on your success or failure. So it's on Amazon. Everything's on Amazon. If you want to check out my site, it's andrewbackerman.com. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. Definitely.
But check it out. I mean, it is self-serving, but it's also genuine. This is probably the best thing you can do.
Definitely. So I believe this podcast will be an eye opener for so many legal tech founders who are listening today. And it was a pleasure having you, Andrew. And thank you so much for giving us your time.
No, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank you. See you sometime again.